The first time I saw Karen Strickland, she was standing in my driveway like she owned it, hands on her hips, expensive sunglasses perched on her surgically tightened face. She scanned the pavement as if she were inspecting an unworthy servant. I had just stepped out of my car, my gym bag slung over my shoulder, when she turned to face me. "You need to move your car," she said flatly. I frowned. "Excuse me? This driveway is part of the HOA's designated walking path," she continued, her voice carrying that grating blend of faux politeness and barely concealed condescension. "You can't park here." I laughed, thinking this had to be some kind of misunderstanding. "Ma'am, this is my driveway. I own this house." Karen pursed her lips like she had just sucked on a lemon. "Yes, well, the community guidelines." I held up a hand. "No HOA here. This house is on private property." "My property," she scoffed, muttering something under her breath, and stormed off, her pristine white sneakers clicking against the pavement. I shrugged it off, but something about the encounter left a sour taste in my mouth. Picture-perfect neighborhood on the surface. I had moved into this suburban paradise just 6 months ago. The kind of place with manicured lawns, oversized SUVs in the driveways, and neighbors who smiled just a little too hard. It was supposed to be a fresh start. A place to settle down, work in peace, and maybe even plant some roots. I should have known better. See, this wasn't just any neighborhood. It was one of those neighborhoods. The kind where people like me, black, successful, minding my own business, were still seen as an anomaly. Oh, they didn't say it outright. No, that would be too obvious. Instead, it came in the form of tight smiles, hesitant waves, and whispered conversations that stopped the moment I got too close. And then there was Karen. Karen, the self-proclaimed guardian of the neighborhood, despite not holding any actual authority. A woman who, I would soon learn, made it her personal mission to remind people like me that we didn't truly belong. First, it was small things. A sideways glance when I mowed my lawn. A comment about how surprised she was that I had such a nice car. The way she never seemed to remember my name, though she addressed every other neighbor with ease. But after our driveway confrontation, it escalated. First, she started walking through my property deliberately, as if trying to establish some unspoken right to it. Then, I'd find tire marks on my driveway that weren't mine. And finally, one day, I came home to a piece of paper taped to my front door. A formal complaint. Not from the city. Not from the HOA because, again, there was no HOA here. No, this was a letter personally signed by Karen Strickland. As a representative of the community, I must inform you that your driveway encroaches upon an unofficial pedestrian pathway. Please remove all vehicles and refrain from obstructing this designated space. I stared at the letter, dumbfounded. Karen wasn't just being nosy. She wasn't just being entitled. She was claiming my driveway, and that's when I knew this was war. The next morning, I stepped outside to find Karen in my driveway again. This time, she wasn't alone. A short, wiry man in a khaki uniform stood beside her, clipboard in hand. They were pointing at my property, talking in hushed tones. I crossed my arms. "Can I help you?" Karen turned, a smile stretching across her face. Too wide, too forced. "Oh, good morning. This is Mr. Dobson from the City Planning Department. We were just discussing the community's concerns regarding your driveway." I glanced at the man, who shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. "Concerns?" Karen sighed dramatically, placing a hand on her chest like she was about to deliver a TED Talk on why I know best. "You see, many of us use this area for our morning and evening walks. It's a natural extension of the pedestrian pathway." She gestured toward the sidewalk. "Your driveway interrupts that flow." I scoffed. "My driveway is a driveway, not a walking path." Karen's smile thinned. "Well, that's debatable." Dobson finally spoke. "Technically, the original city plans show this street as having an extended pedestrian zone, but over time, some properties were," he hesitated, glancing at me, "altered." "Altered?" I narrowed my eyes. "I bought this house as is. There were no issues then. So why is this a problem now?" Karen's voice dripped with false sympathy. We just want to maintain the neighborhood's aesthetic integrity. There it was. I clenched my jaw. Let me guess. My house doesn't fit that integrity. Karen's expression flickered, just for a second, but long enough for me to catch it. Mr. Dobson cleared his throat. We're just here to ensure compliance with community standards. I took a step forward. There's no HOA here. There are no community standards dictating my driveway. Karen's eyes gleamed, like she was enjoying this. Well, I suppose we'll have to see what the city says about that. Then she turned and walked away, Dobson trailing after her. The unease grows. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. But over the next few days, little things kept piling up. A fresh coat of spray paint marked a line at the edge of my driveway. I hadn't requested any city work. A warning notice, unsigned, was stuffed into my mailbox, claiming my driveway was in violation of unregistered modifications. And then, I caught Karen again. It was late, past 10 p.m. I was taking out the trash when I saw her, standing at the edge of my property, whispering into her phone. The glow from the streetlight illuminated her face, and for the first time, she didn't mask her expression. Smug, triumphant, like she had already won. A chill ran through me. This wasn't just about a driveway. Karen was planning something, and I needed to find out what. I wasn't going to sit around and let Karen steal my driveway. The next morning, I went straight to City Hall. If there really was some zoning issue, I wanted to hear it from an official source, not Karen and her personal lackey, Dobson. At the records office, a bored-looking clerk typed my address into the system. She squinted at the screen, then shook her head. There's no pedestrian pathway designated on your property, she said. I let out a breath of relief. Are there any complaints filed against my house? She frowned, clicking through the system. Nope, nothing. I knew it. Karen was bluffing. But when I returned home, I found another notice taped to my front door. This one printed on official city letterhead. Notice of zoning violation. Failure to comply may result in legal action. The confrontation begins. I didn't even have to guess who was behind this. I stormed across the street, knocking sharply on Karen's door. She answered with a serene smile, like she had been expecting me. Oh, hello again. Can I help you? I held up the notice. What is this? She blinked innocently. Oh dear. A violation notice? That's unfortunate. I clenched my teeth. Cut the act, Karen. I went to City Hall. There's no record of my driveway being a pedestrian path. There were no complaints filed. So how did I end up with this? She leaned against her doorframe, her smirk deepening. I have connections, dear. I stiffened. Connections? She let out a patronizing sigh. You see, some of us have been in this community for a very long time. We have relationships with people who make decisions. She tilted her head. And you, well, you're new here. Maybe things work differently where you're from. But around here, we like to keep things orderly. There it was again. That thinly veiled condescension. That you don't belong here attitude. I felt my blood boil. I took a step closer. Let me be clear, Karen. You're harassing me. I'm not going anywhere. And my driveway sure as hell isn't a walking path. Her smile didn't falter. Oh, sweetheart, she cooed, voice dripping with malice. You might want to be careful. People who don't cooperate tend to find themselves in difficult situations. The fight for evidence. I needed proof. If Karen was using her connections to manipulate city officials, I had to find out how deep this went. I started by checking my security cameras. Sure enough, there she was, Karen and Dobson standing in my driveway 3 nights ago, pointing at my property and taking notes. But that wasn't all. On another night, Karen had been caught on camera moving my garbage cans into the street, just before a sanitation truck came by and knocked them over. A staged violation. She was setting me up. I compiled everything, security footage, the fake notices, the spray-painted marks that had mysteriously appeared on my driveway. Then I made some calls. First, to an actual city zoning official, one not in Karen's pocket. A woman named Linda, who, after hearing my story, was not happy. That's highly irregular, she said. If someone issued a violation without an official complaint, that's an abuse of power. Then I called a local journalist I knew, a guy named James who loved exposing shady neighborhood politics. "Let me get this straight," James said, barely containing his excitement. "A suburban Karen is faking zoning violations to harass the only black homeowner on the block? Looks that way." He let out a low whistle. "Oh, this is gonna be fun." The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait. 2 days later, I got the letter, a formal summons. According to the city, I was now required to attend a compliance hearing regarding my supposed zoning violation. If I failed to resolve the issue, I could face fines or even forced modifications to my property. I knew exactly who was behind it, and I also knew she thought she had won. The showdown. The hearing was held at the local municipal building, a small, wood-paneled room with a long table and a few stiff chairs. Sitting at the head was a middle-aged city official, a tired-looking man named Mr. Caldwell. To his left, Karen, dressed in an immaculate beige suit. She sat with an air of smug authority, a folder neatly stacked in front of her. Beside her was Dobson, the so-called zoning officer she had roped into her scheme. I took my seat across from them, sliding my own folder onto the table. Caldwell sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Let's begin. This hearing is to determine whether the property at 117 Oakwood Drive is in violation of community zoning guidelines." He turned to Karen. "Mrs. Strickland, since you filed the complaint, you may present your case." Karen nodded, standing gracefully. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell." She clasped her hands together, adopting the same condescending PDA mom voice she always used when trying to sound official. "As you know, Oakwood Drive has long been a beloved walking route for our residents. However, certain properties have disrupted this harmony." She gave me a tight smile. "Mr. Carter's driveway, for example, encroaches upon what has always been an unofficial pedestrian pathway." Caldwell frowned. "Unofficial?" She waved dismissively. "It was always understood. I have witnesses who can confirm that for years, this space was used freely until recently." Her meaning was clear. Until I moved in. I stayed quiet, letting her dig her own grave. "Furthermore," she continued, pulling out a document, "we have a zoning violation notice issued by the city, which confirms that his driveway does not comply with community aesthetic guidelines." Dobson nodded along, though he looked less certain than before. Karen turned to me, her smile sharp. "Perhaps Mr. Carter simply didn't do his research before moving here." I let the silence stretch. Then I leaned forward. "Are you done?" Karen blinked, thrown off by my calmness. "Excuse me." I slid my own documents across the table. "Because I have some things to present, too." Caldwell took the first sheet, a printed email from the real zoning department, confirming that no violation had ever been officially filed against my property. His frown deepened. "This contradicts the notice you provided, Mrs. Strickland." Karen's smile flickered. "Well, I'm sure there's been a mix-up. I wasn't done." I pulled out security footage stills of Karen and Dobson sneaking onto my property, marking my driveway with fake zoning lines. Then, screenshots of her moving my trash cans into the street before city trucks came by. And finally, a printed statement from Linda, the city official I had spoken to, confirming that any unauthorized violations issued under Karen's influence would be subject to investigation. I folded my arms. "Now, Mr. Caldwell, tell me, does that sound like a mix-up to you?" The room fell into dead silence. Karen's face had drained of color. Dobson looked like he wanted to disappear. Caldwell slowly turned to her. "Mrs. Strickland," he said, voice now dangerously calm, "can you explain this?" Karen let out a nervous laugh. It's clearly a misunderstanding. I was only trying to." I cut her off. "Trying to what, Karen?" "Get rid of the wrong kind of homeowner." Her mouth snapped shut. She knew. She knew she was caught. Karen was speechless. For the first time since this mess started, she wasn't smirking, wasn't condescending, wasn't pretending she had the upper hand. She was cornered. I leaned back in my chair, watching her with the same cold calculation she had used against me. Go on, Karen, I said, tilting my head. Tell Mr. Caldwell why you and Dobson were marking my property in the middle of the night. She let out a strained laugh. This is absurd. Those photos could be anything, taken any time. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out one last piece of evidence. They're time-stamped, directly from my security cameras. I slid a flash drive across the table. Caldwell plugged it into his laptop. The screen on the wall flickered to life, playing the unedited footage. Clear as day, there she was, Karen and Dobson, standing in my driveway under the dim glow of a street lamp. Karen pointing at the ground, gesturing to where Dobson should spray fake zoning marks. Her voice, crisp and undeniable. Make it look official. We'll get him out of here one way or another. The room went dead silent. Dobson paled. Wait, what? His voice wavered as he turned to her. You said this was an official request. You told me this was all approved. Karen shot him a furious glare. Shut up, Dobson. But it was too late. Caldwell's face was turning a shade of red I had never seen before. He turned to Dobson first. Are you telling me you knowingly falsified city zoning records? Dobson scrambled for words. I. Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is a witch hunt, she snapped. He's manipulating you. This is all. Caldwell raised a hand. Enough. His voice was sharp. Mrs. Strickland, I strongly advise you to remain silent before you say something else incriminating. I smirked. She's already said plenty. The public exposure. Caldwell stood, his chair scraping against the floor. I'll be forwarding this evidence to the City Ethics Committee for formal investigation. If what I'm seeing is accurate, Mrs. Strickland, you've committed fraud. Karen shot up from her seat. That's ridiculous. I was just abusing your influence, manipulating zoning officers, illegally harassing a homeowner. Caldwell snapped. I suggest you call a lawyer. Her face contorted with rage. This is his fault. He doesn't belong here. This is my neighborhood. I built this community, and I won't let some. She caught herself, but the damage was done. The silence was icy. Caldwell inhaled sharply. Mrs. Strickland, you are now under review for civil violations, fraud, and harassment. If further evidence emerges, we may escalate this to criminal charges. Karen's breathing was ragged. Panicked, she turned on Dobson. You stupid idiot. You said this would be easy. Dobson bolted up from his chair. Oh no, lady. You're not dragging me down with you. You were the one who filed the complaint, who faked the violation letter, who... You helped? She shrieked. Caldwell slammed his hand on the table. Enough. Both of them froze. Mr. Dobson, you are now under internal investigation for professional misconduct, Caldwell said, voice clipped. You will be placed on immediate suspension pending a formal hearing. Dobson slumped in his chair, like the weight of it had finally hit him. Karen? She was still fuming. The final blow. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get better, the door opened. James, the journalist, stepped inside, camera in hand. Karen's eyes widened in horror. What the? Sorry I'm late, James said, grinning. Had to make sure we had good lighting. Karen's hands trembled. You can't. Oh, but I can, James said, waving a signed waiver. This is a public hearing, Mrs. Strickland. You agreed to it when you filed the complaint. And lucky me. I got the whole thing on tape. Karen whirled on me, her face now a mask of pure hatred. You did this. I stood up, gathering my papers. No, Karen. I smiled. You did this to yourself. Her world was crumbling, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. Karen lost everything. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, James' article went live, complete with video footage from the hearing, my security camera clips, and statements from Caldwell and Linda. The headline? HOA tyrant caught faking violations to oust black homeowner. It spread like wildfire. By noon, the HOA was flooded with angry emails from residents who had no idea Karen had been weaponizing her position for years. They held an emergency vote that same evening. Karen was removed as HOA president. Unanimously, but that was only the beginning. The consequences. Dobson lost his job. Caldwell followed through on his word, launching a formal investigation into his misconduct. By the end of the week, Dobson had resigned from his position, though everyone knew he had been forced out. And Karen? She tried to fight back, screamed about cancel culture and false accusations, threatened to sue me, the city, the HOA, even James. But no one was listening. Then came the lawsuits. Linda, the zoning official I had spoken to, pushed for legal action against Karen for falsifying official documents. The city attorney took one look at the evidence and moved forward with a civil fraud case. Karen had always bragged about her flawless reputation, her influence, her connections. Now, she was a public disgrace. Neighborhood reckoning. At first, the neighborhood was silent. People who had smiled at me at block parties, who had waved from their porches, were suddenly awkward. They had known something was off about Karen but had never questioned it. Now they had to. Then, one by one, they started showing up at my door. Mrs. Patel, who had lived here for 15 years, came by first. "I'm sorry," she said, guilt in her voice. "I should have spoken up. I knew Karen was targeting certain people, but I thought—" She trailed off, ashamed. Mr. Lewis, an older man who had always kept his head down, admitted, "She told me you were changing the neighborhood too much. I didn't agree, but I didn't stop her either." Even the Johnsons, who had been Karen's biggest supporters, came by, looking shaken. "We had no idea how far she was going," they muttered. "She fooled us too." For years, Karen had ruled through manipulation and intimidation. She had counted on people being too scared or too indifferent to challenge her. Not anymore. Reclaiming my peace. A week later, I stood at the end of my perfectly legal driveway, watching as a city crew ripped out Karen's fake zoning markers. James showed up with a coffee. "So," he said, grinning, "how's it feel to take down a suburban dictator?" I took a deep breath. For the first time since moving here, I felt free. "She tried to erase me," I said, watching as the last of her fake lines were washed away. "But I'm still here." James clinked his coffee against mine. "Damn right you are." And as I looked around at my home, my driveway, my rightful place in this neighborhood, I knew I had won.